From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Moscow for a 3-day state visit as ties between the two countries have grown ever stronger. Xi met President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin and both leaders praised their close relations. On Thursday, Xi is expected to travel to St. Petersburg to attend an economic forum hosted by Putin. The two leaders have signed a joint declaration on global partnership and strategic cooperation with the hopes of entering a new era.
Last
year we set a goal to reach $100 billion of bilateral commodities trade. Due to the efforts of our teams, our two governments, we exceeded that number, and we reached $180 billion. And this year, in the first quarter, trade is also on the increase. It is already up by more than 3.4%.
Our bilateral relations have not yet reached the maximum and can become even better. We are ready to work together with Russia in order to continuously increase the impact of our countries. High-level cooperation so that our cooperation could give our two peoples a greater sense of achievement and so that we can promote the Russian-Chinese agenda in international affairs.
The leaders also addressed a number of strategic international issues, including the political situation in Venezuela. President Putin said he is working together with his Chinese counterpart to stabilize the situation in Venezuela. As the U.S. economic blockade on Cuba worsens, the Cuban government continues to strengthen its ties with Russia. We have more in this report.
During an official meeting at the Kremlin, Cuban and Russian authorities reviewed the fulfillment of bilateral agreements, and they confirmed their commitment to further cooperation.
These talks and the links we establish are of utmost importance to us. We are accomplishing the goals established by our leaders. We are intensifying and diversifying economic ties.
The Russian Deputy Prime Minister spoke about the need to strengthen cooperation to overcome unilateral sanctions imposed by the U.S.
I would like to point out how difficult Cuba's situation is at the moment, thanks to U.S. economic sanctions and to the pressure being exerted on the Venezuelan economy.
Before this meeting, the Vice President of Cuba's Ministers' Council spoke with the Russian Agriculture Minister about strengthening the island's food crop production with the help of equipment and products from Russia.
Esteemed Mr. Cabrizas, we are interested in exporting meat, grain, and other produce to Cuba.
Cooperation in commerce as well as in the automotive, pharmaceutical, railway and high-tech industries are some of the goals of these meetings. But above all else, they serve to cement discontent with the U.S. aggressions against progressive governments in Latin America and the rest of the world.
The Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has won a key vote of confidence in Congress, allowing him to push through his anti-corruption reforms. After a day and a half of debate, lawmakers voted by 77 to 44 in favor of the motion. Vizcarra had called the vote to force the parliament to back his reforms, which more than 80% of Peruvians backed in a referendum last December. The president had threatened to dissolve Congress if it voted against the motion. Parties of the left voted against.
The vote was to protect member seats in Congress. It turns its back on the country's reality because in Peru, what people want is the closure of Congress. Because it is discredited, because it shields the corrupt.
Brazil has closed 5 of its embassies in the Caribbean. Brazil's foreign ministry has confirmed the closure of consulates in the islands of Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Dominica. The diplomatic representations were set up during the tenure of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. There are also reports that Brazil is considering closing its embassies in at least 2 African countries, Sierra Leone and Liberia. Ecuador's former Foreign Minister María Fernanda Espinosa has defended herself against a censure motion in the National Assembly. She did it by video conference since she is in New York at the current UN General Assembly president. She's accused of a breach of duties during her time as minister related to the security crisis on the northern border during 2018 and the granting of Ecuadorian citizenship to Julian Assange in 2017.
There is no evidence from the Audit Committee which supports the alleged failure to comply with the obligations which, according to the Constitution and the law, it was my duty to discharge during the insecure situation on our border with Colombia. It is publicly known that neither the President of the Republic nor the former Ministers of Defense and Interior, who were directly responsible for security in this case, have been called to face a vote of censure like this. It makes no sense to hold the Foreign Ministry responsible when it has no competence in this area.
Moving on, a summit is underway in Washington between the Mexican Foreign Minister and the U.S. Vice President. Marcelo Ebrard and Mike Pence are discussing the threats by President Donald Trump to impose a 5% tariff on all goods imported from Mexico if it doesn't stop the flow of migrants from Central America. The tariffs are due to come into force on Monday and could increase by a further 5% each month until they reach 25% in October. And now take a deep breath, because today the world is thinking about clean air. On World Environment Day, the UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres made a call to the world to take action in favor of the climate and to change habits. So let's take a look at the impact of air pollution, the theme of this year's Environment Day. Each year, 7 million people die from air pollution. 92% of the worldwide population do not breathe clean air. Air pollution costs the global economy $5 trillion every year in welfare costs, and ground-level ozone pollution is expected to reduce staple crop yields by 26% by 2030. Moving on, Caribbean countries are increasingly feeling the economic impacts of climate change, with rising sea levels set to cause billions of dollars in damage. The Association of Caribbean States has pledged to tackle these effects. Let's take a look at the work the organization is doing to preserve Caribbean shorelines.
The countries in our region are facing a slow-moving but devastating disease called sea level rise and coastal erosion. We hope that the countries benefiting from this project will be able to present analysis of the impact of climate change on their beaches.
And to understand it properly, we need a global data set to properly manage. And by supporting this project, we could have a better understanding what is happening in the region.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Nicaragua, hundreds, if not more, Sandinista families have paid homage to slain comrade Bismarck Martinez at the National Palace in Managua. A forensics report confirmed his death on Wednesday, followed by an announcement by Vice President Rosario Murillo, who indicated that the remains of Martinez, who had already become a symbol of the Nicaraguan people, would be honored. The left-wing activist was last seen traveling to the city of Jinotepe. His whereabouts have been unknown for months. However, in September of 2018, a video showing him being tortured circulated on social media. In 1977, at age of 15, Bismarck Martinez joined the Sandinista National Liberation Front to fight against the U.S.-backed regime of Anastasio Somoza. In year why party groups have chosen their nominees for their respective internal conflicts. The cutoff date to submit nominations was on Tuesday, and the winners will contest the country's presidential elections.
Uruguayans love to vote, and this is demonstrated in every electoral year when they practice their democratic right. Internal elections are carded for June 30th in the various political parties. This will determine who will run as a presidential candidate. On the cutoff date, a record 28 presidential pre-candidates were registered for the internal elections, representing 15 political parties with 3,000 voting sheets.
This number might be surprising, but that's because we are having several elections running concurrently. So it's not that we are having an election with 3,000 candidates. No, we are talking about 15 parties that are each having internal elections to select their national and regional candidates as well as the pre-candidate for presidency.
There will be internal elections in only 4 of the 15 political parties that are contesting presidential elections. The left-wing party, Frente Amplio, presented 4 candidates. The opposition party, Partido Nacional, presented 5. The Colorado Party, 6. And the People's Party, 2. For the remaining 11 parties, it will be the first time that 5 candidates will be presented. The favorite for the presidential candidacy of the Socialist Party is former Minister of Industry and ex-mayor of Montevideo, Daniel Martinez, who presented 264 lists and thousands of candidates all over the country.
My goal is to create equal opportunities for every citizen so that everyone has a chance to develop. To achieve your dream of being able to work and study wherever you like, and that this does not depend on the neighborhood you come from, or last name, or your family's economic situation, but on your drive and willingness to fight.
The right-wing party, Partido Nacional, is the main opposition party. Its favorite presidential candidate is Senator Luis Lacalle Pou, son of ex-president Luis Alberto Lacalle.
There's a deep concern among people who don't have jobs, and those who are employed are afraid of losing it. So they look to us, wondering how we plan to fix this.
Despite leading previous polls, the right-wing party has been shaken up by second-place runner Juan Sartori, a millionaire unknown to most people, a man who joined the party months ago and did not even live in the country.
We want to boost our agriculture sector, which is the largest in the country, mainly inland, which is the most impoverished part of the country. Everyone knows that the agriculture sector can't continue like this.
The internal elections on June 30th will determine which candidates could run for each party in the national elections. The Electoral Court confirmed that more than 2.5 million people are eligible to vote. In the last internal elections in 2014, less than 40% voted.
Argentina is already preparing for elections in October, and it is clear that the neoliberal policies implemented by current President Mauricio Macri will continue to affect the population and whoever is elected president.
Since he came to office in 2015, President Mauricio Macri has increased the prices of public services by over 2,000%. He then decided to raise the price of gas by another 30%, along with other increases.
There are already increases of 2,500% in electricity, as well as in gas. But now the government is trying to slow down the price increases because 2019 is an election year, and the re-election of Macri's Cambiemos alliance is seriously in question. This is why there's an agreement with the utility companies not to continue increasing prices. However, the cost of gas and electricity will still rise, and the consequences of this will further aggravate Argentina's recession.
Although the Macri government said it wanted to freeze prices, this was not quite accurate. People were able to put off their payments, but the increases in electricity and gas will feed through later.
In April this year, due to the terrible economic crisis caused by their own economic policies, the government launched an economic package of so-called economic and social measures to alleviate the situation of the workers. This package was meant to freeze the cost of the public services, but it didn't really do that. For example, an 8% increase of the price of electricity was suspended, but it was already gone up 40%, and in the further 8% rise and was just postponed.
The cost of healthcare has also risen sharply, and people's wages are not sufficient to cover such prices. As a result, there has been a decrease in the consumption of medication and basic medical services.
todo lo que tiene que ver con los aumentos de...
All the increases in the cost of health services are tied to the dollar exchange rate. This has been very unstable in Argentina, and that is having a major impact. It is highly probable that in the coming months, maybe not in June, but later, we will see more inflationary pressure resulting from the exchange rate.
There are just a few months to go before the presidential election, but regardless of who wins, more increases in the cost of services will come into effect later in the year and hit the pockets of ordinary Argentinians. Without a doubt, the country is facing a situation of great uncertainty and economic hardship.
Barbados is ready to give up its majority ownership of the financially troubled regional airline Liat and hand it back to Antigua and Barbuda. Prime Minister Mia Mottley made the announcement in Parliament on Tuesday evening, ending weeks of speculation. Liat is owned by 11 Caribbean governments. Barbados is the largest single shareholder with a 49.9% stake in the airline. Mottley confirmed to the House that Barbados has accepted an offer from Prime Minister Gaston Brown to take up most of its majority stake.
We have accepted an offer from a sister Caribbean state, Antigua and Barbuda, we enter into negotiations with them to see whether a deal can be concluded with respect to Antigua and Barbuda taking up our shares in exchange for them taking up our responsibilities as a shareholder within the context of Liat. This will require negotiations on the part of both countries, and therefore we will be writing Prime Minister Brown to indicate that just as he has established a negotiating team, the government of Barbados will establish a negotiating team that will meet with his negotiating team to settle the terms if we can.
Muslims around the world are celebrating Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. In Trinidad and Tobago, Muslims and even non-Muslims are celebrating one of the most joyous days in the Islamic calendar by giving back to society. After the time of feasting to mark the end of month-long fast, Muslims gave special charitable contributions known as Zakat al-Fitr. It often takes the form of food and other items. Muslims throughout the island also attend mosque services and learn of the Quran's teachings. At least 6 people have died after heavy rains triggered a series of landslides in the eastern Uganda district of Budada on Wednesday. It is feared that the death toll could rise as people are still searching for their missing relatives. Local authorities estimate that hundreds have fled their homes and have taken shelter in churches, mosques, or with relatives. Over 100,000 people living in the area require urgent relocation. And still in Africa, an invention by a South African engineer that secures and then dispenses pills to patients has won a major African engineering prize. Nea Uturi was announced as the winner of the 2019 Engineering Innovation Award from the Royal Academy of Engineering. Uturi's invention, the Pele Box, is a simple wall of lockers controlled by a digital system. It allows healthcare workers to stock prescription refills. Pele Box then sends patients a one-time personal identification number, which they enter into the user panel to get their medicine. This keeps the medicine safe and reduces waiting times at clinics. The Islamic State group has confirmed their presence in Mozambique for the first time, announcing its fighters had repelled an army attack in the north of the country. Since 2017, the district of Cabo Delgado has faced growing attacks, with over 200 people killed and many villages torched. A police spokesperson says security forces are committed to ensuring public security.
We reiterate that security forces are located throughout the national territory and are carrying out operations to guarantee order and public security in the national territory and ensure that people circulate in an atmosphere of peace and tranquility.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. United States President Donald Trump has arrived in Ireland for a state visit where he was once again met with protests after his UK trip. A group of protesters gathered in Shannon holding banners denouncing Trump's policies and demonstrating against Trump's visit to Ireland. Trump experienced the same humiliation during his visit to the United Kingdom, where he was faced with a series of protests.
I don't want him here. I don't like him. He's a bully. He's a windbag. You shouldn't give bullies and windbags power. It's the wrong thing to do. You should be cut down to size rather than rewarded with supreme power. It's just crazy.
I think to sum up, he probably stands for everything that I don't, and I couldn't really. Can't yet find anything that I agree with him on. I think he's a menace to the planet. He denies climate change, which is rampant and threatening the whole planet, and he's withdrawn from the Paris Agreement.
As Muslims celebrate Eid al-Fitr in Sudan, the head of the Transitional Military Council has offered to continue negotiations with the opposition alliance. This announcement comes one day after he scrapped all agreements made with the opposition. It's also 2 days after security forces reportedly killed 60 people who were staging a sit-in protest outside the military headquarters. Protests have been ongoing in Sudan since the ousting of former President Omar al-Bashir, with protesters demanding that the military council hand over power to a civilian-led government.
Free citizens the past few days have witnessed sorrowful events resulting from the joint security force efforts to deal with certain threats and security complications. Unfortunately, events unfollowed, resulting in the fall of victims and of the injured. We are sorry for what happened. We pray for the souls of the martyrs and hope the quickest of recoveries for the wounded. The General Prosecutor has been directed towards investigating these events. The necessary legal measures will be taken as soon as possible, as we cannot allow any circumstances to stand in the way of achieving the goals of the revolution.
Meanwhile, the ruling Transitional Military Council has launched an investigation into deadly clashes which took place in the country. The council announced on Wednesday that it is initiating an independent probe into a raid by security forces on a protest camp in Khartoum. Council Chairman General Mohamed Dagalo assured that it will be transparent and that the guilty will be punished.
Over the past few days, we have had an increasing number of martyrs, the last of which were 2, yesterday, that are dying. My brothers, it is now clear they want RSF troops to be killed. They call them protesters. They are not protesters. They are gangs, which we have warned against early on. The conspiring group will not get through to the Sudanese people. Now, we are warning from here, warning all of the Sudanese people that there are false vehicles in neighborhoods. Yesterday, in Ambasia and Mansoura, in disguise as RSF, threatening and attacking people.
Residents of Syria's Aleppo city are making every effort to rebuild their city, which was extensively damaged in the 8-year civil war. One of the places that are undergoing reconstruction is the city's historic Souk El Saketieh Bazaar. The project aims to restore the once popular marketplace. The project is expected to take about 8 months. The Syrian conflict began in 2011 and escalated into a full-scale war between the government and rebel groups backed by Western governments.
We have overcome most of the difficulties, but the main problem is how to persuade people to come back and repair their shops, as we only rehabilitate the main structure of the bazaar, rather than private shops. The rehabilitation project includes many procedures and mainly focuses on eliminating the signs of the war.
The Emmanuel Queen's Women's Football Academy in Nigeria hopes to raise the next generation of female football players. Academy owner Emmanuel Edith says there is enormous talent among young Nigerian girls who can go on to become the stars of the women's national team. As such, he has called on the government and corporate organizations to fund women football academies in the country. However, Edith admits that he faces a challenge of convincing parents that football is not only for boys.
That year, my dad did not allow me to play ball, so I forced myself. I was sneaking out of home, going to play ball without his notice. But unfortunately, when I got a scholarship, he allowed me fully to play football.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am